right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. As been mentioned, today we're talking about plain language and people first language at our office hours today from Accessible Web. And essentially, we're going to be talking about accessible communication and talking about kind of two different aspects of that. So, my name's Kelsey Kloboski. I'm a senior digital accessibility specialist here at Accessible Web. So, our agenda today, we will be discussing what is plain language, why use plain language, strategies for plain language style, and a strategy for plain language structure. Then we'll shift to discussing ways to describe and talk about disability. So, we'll talk about person first and identity first language and what to do when you make a mistake. So, first, what is plain language? Plain language is simple, clear communication. Plain language is also specific, accurate, and complete. And why should we use plain language? Because all audiences benefit from plain language. This includes people with disabilities and people without disabilities. Information written in plain language is easier to understand. Forms written in plain language tend to have fewer submission errors. Some examples are of people who especially benefit from plain language are people with cognitive disabilities and reading disabilities. It also benefits people who are reading or listening to the information in a different format, such as if they are listening to a screen reader or text to speech, or if they're looking at a transcript. Plain language also benefits second language learners, people who are new to the subject, and people who are distracted, busy, or tired. So, I previously worked at a university where I'd sometimes hear concerns about using plain language with academic audiences. The concern was that plain language would oversimplify the information or that it didn't really matter for people who are faculty members and doctoral students. But even when communicating with the most highly educated people in the world, that group includes people with disabilities. And whether people in that group identify as disabled or not, it definitely includes people who are distracted, busy, and tired. So I take that as an example of any audience, and all audiences benefit from using plain language strategies. Plain language makes information easier to understand and reduces errors for everyone. It means that your audience can spend less mental energy decoding your sentences and more mental energy digesting and remembering the information. So let's talk about some strategies for using plain language. Our first strategy for plain language style is word choice. Ideally, we want to use simple, clear terms. When you can't avoid a complex or technical term, include a definition the first time you use it. This can be an explanation in the sentence itself, or in web content, it can even be a link to a glossary entry. We use this strategy in some of our tools here at Accessible Web. You also want to avoid or define acronyms. It's best not to assume your audience will immediately recognize acronyms, even if you consider them common in your field. So let's take a look at an example from plainlanguage.gov. That's a website that encourages US government agencies to use plain language. So in our example sentence is when the process of freeing a vehicle that has been stuck results in ruts or holes, the operator will fill the rut or hole created by such activity before removing the vehicle from the immediate area. So we have several complex phrases and terms that could be put more simply in to follow a more plain language strategy. So, as a couple of examples of revisions we might make, results in ruts or holes can become make a hole. The operator can be replaced with you or maybe even with driver. And removing the vehicle from the immediate area can become drive away. So, the revised version of this sentence was if you make a hole while freeing a stuck vehicle, you must fill the hole before you drive away. So this sentence is shorter, it uses simpler terms and simpler phrases, and is easier to understand the meaning of the sentence and what's expected of people who are dealing with stuck vehicles. This better communicates to drivers what they need to know. Our second strategy for plain language style is to use active voice. In every sentence, clearly state who or what is doing the action. This idea is easier to understand with an example. One of the most famous examples is the phrase, mistakes were made. Who made the mistake? We don't know. That phrase is worded to hide the information on purpose. When we're trying to communicate clearly, we don't want to hide information. So let's imagine an example from a marketing site for a cleaning business. The windows will be cleaned once per month. Who or what will clean the windows? We don't know. The sentence doesn't tell us. There's just this amorphous, they will be cleaned. If we revise for active voice, we give clear information. And for a marketing site, we even get a chance to talk up our services even more. Our tidy staff will clean the windows once per month, or our state of the art robots will clean the windows once per month. Both either of these sentences or some other revision gives a clearer sense of what's going to happen and who's doing it, and just gives clearer information to the reader or the listener if it's an audio. When looking for passive voice, be verbs like was, were, are, and will be are worth a closer look to make sure you haven't unintentionally used passive voice. Next, we're going to talk about a strategy for using plain language structures. The strategy we're going to discuss today is to use simple sentences. Here we mean grammatically simple sentences that use fewer phrases or clauses. This lends itself to including only one or two ideas in each sentence. When each sentence deals with only one or two ideas, your audience can better absorb those ideas before moving on to the next. Multiple commas, parentheses, or dashes within the same sentence can be signs that it's overly complex. That doesn't mean you need to cut ideas out. Instead, you can split a complex sentence apart into multiple simple sentences to communicate the same overall ideas. So we've been talking about communication, and using plain language is incredibly helpful when communicating with both disabled and non-disabled people. We can also bring similar care to communicating about disability. How we communicate about disabilities reflects respect for people with disabilities and their identities. When describing a person with a disability, there are two common approaches: person first language and identity first language. Person first language is when the person is referred to before the disability. Examples of person first descriptions include people with disabilities, a woman with cerebral palsy, and children who are blind. People who prefer this phrasing may say that it puts emphasis on them as an individual or that it treats disability as only a piece of who they are. Identity first language leads with the disability. Examples of this phrasing include disabled people, a deaf couple, or an autistic teenager. People who prefer this phrasing may say it recognizes the importance of disability and their identity, community, or experiences. Some also say that this phrasing treats disability as a neutral description that doesn't need to be treated differently than other describing words. There's no single answer to whether it's better to use person first or identity first language. Opinions vary a lot. People's opinions are shaped by their community, their cultural or language background, and their personal experiences with disability. Neither strategy is more quote unquote correct. If you are describing a specific person or organization, ask what they prefer and then honor that preference. It's best to avoid making assumptions about a person's identity or how they want to be described. And finally, what if I make a mistake when I'm talking about disability? What if I say something that's inconsiderate or offensive? Culture and language are constantly evolving, and no one is going to get it right 100% of the time. So, for this idea, I'd like to share a quote from Kara Reedy, who's the director and founder of the Disabled Journalists Association. And she said, ableist language is so intertwined with our culture, we don't even realize we're using it. Most people understand that if you're working on something, you're going to make mistakes, but you have to start. I take this to mean that putting in the effort is important, and it's the only way to make progress. In order to improve accessibility and inclusion, we have to be able to talk about disability. So if you do make a mistake, the first thing to do is to apologize briefly, acknowledge the mistake, but try not to dwell on it in the moment. Then, on your own time, think about what you learned from the interaction. It can also be really helpful to do additional research from trusted sources. Finally, commit to doing better next time and applying what you've learned. So here at Accessible Web, we are here to support you in learning more about accessibility and improving your organization's culture and practices, especially around digital accessibility. So we have several key areas where we provide support. One is our web accessibility software ramp. This has tools for automatically scanning for digital accessibility, as well as tracking and managing your accessibility work. There is a discount code in the chat to support a free trial for that. We also offer consulting and training like this webinar. We also have an academy that includes a self-paced, self-guided course that dives deeper into the topics we discussed today. We also do accessibility audits where we do a manual check of accessibility of digital sites and apps. And from those evaluations, we can create accessibility conformance reports, typically in the form of a voluntary product accessibility template. All right, and that brings us to the end of my prepared remarks. So we are ready to take questions or comments.